So formally, I would like to thank everybody for joining us for our meeting of the Metropolitan Study Group of the SRIA today. And before we go any further, I would ask for your focus, please. I'm about to light a candle here, and I would like everybody to please still yourselves, center yourselves, and focus just for a few short moments upon the light emitted by this candle. In the name of the Most High, Creator and Sustainer of all universes and realms, grant unto us, those who are gathered in this particular way for our meeting today, that our thoughts and our feelings may be inspired and guided by thy light and by the love which surpasseth all understanding. World without end. Amen. Thank you, everybody. So today's meeting is monumentous in the history of the Metropolitan Study Group because of the fact that for today's presentation, it's going to be presented by Geraldine Beskin, who is the first woman to present a paper for the Metropolitan Study Group, and I hope the first of many to come. But it's wonderful. She's going to be speaking about Frederick Hockley, as I'm sure you all are aware. And it gives me great pleasure to hand over to Geraldine at the Atlantis Bookstore in London. I'm just going to pin your image to the screen and over to you, Geraldine. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I wouldn't have said yes so fast if I thought about it, I must admit, when I was asked to talk. But I'm genuinely, from my heart's bottom, as Pavarotti once said, I am thrilled, I am honoured, and I truly, truly do appreciate just how huge this is and how far you've all come. I'm kicking off your 156th year, and that's an enormous record for any organisation. And it's got a fabulous history, and I hope very much that it has a fabulous future as well. For those of you that don't know me, my daughter and I, Barley, run the shop together. We're co-owners of it, but I do have something of an esoteric history as well. In witchcraft terms, I come from an Irish line, and my father was with traditional witches. So we don't initiate ourselves, so the Gardnerians and people don't think we're witches. My father was initiated as Gardnerian, but they don't count that. And we don't care. We don't like pagan politics. We're just not bothered. I am not now, and nor have I ever been, the head of the OTO, despite what lots of people would like me to be. I have, however, been a member of the Ellis Cohen, of the Martinists. I was in A. Waite's Fellowship of the Rosy Cross, and I was just saying that they debated for 17 years whether to let women in or not. And then Bob Gilbert went to see the wonderful Marjorie Debenham, who ran the Ancient Free and Accepted Masons, of which I was a member, Pilgrimage Lodge #1. And she was a guide and mentor to me. And she said, well, of course I was in the Fellowship of the Rosy Cross. And so they decided to let women in. And I was one of the two, and I was the one that stayed the course until we left Blackheath. And I absolutely loved it. And the difference it made to the men, hearing a woman say what they had been saying for years, and walking around with a woman, the whole expression of the rituals changed enormously. And it opened their hearts to an extent. It was really quite intense up there at times, because they knew it, you know, but they just heard it with different ears. And I say that was a rare privilege. That
Geraldine, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Could I ask, you have a fan in the back there, which
Yes.
is rotating, and every time it turns toward the microphone, it's interfering with the microphone.
I've got
So
one here as well.
if you
So
could
let
just
me-
reposition it so it doesn't blow at the microphone, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
No, stop. Hold on, is that one? Yeah, that one. Okay.
That's great. Thank you, Martin. Thank you.
Yeah.
That seems to be better. Yes, thank you.
Good, good.
And what I'd like to do as well, I'm just going to make sure that everybody else is muted. So you might need to unmute yourselves in just a moment, please. Just 1 second. Okay, you can unmute yourself now. Thank you. Over to you again. Thank you very much.
So I've more or less come to the end of my formal esoteric endeavours. Other than to say that I got thrown out of brownies twice, I haven't really joined very much, but the things I have joined, I've thoroughly enjoyed. So Hockley is a name to be conjured with, obviously. The John Hamill biography of him was reissued a few years ago, the Rosicrucian seer. That and various of Hockley's works that were produced by Tyshan Press, which is the publishing arm of Wiser Antiquarian Books, they still have copies if anybody wants them. And that's as good as we've got. But I did this talk a few years ago. I'm not going to say pre-COVID, but I'm very keen to hear what the up-to-date thinking is about him and what research has been done since I put this together. So this is fairly detailed, but it's a sketch of his life. So he's become an increasingly important figure of 19th century Masonry and esotericism, but yet he's still an elusive one. His year of birth is firmly established and confidently repeated as 1809 or 1811. On the 13th of, yeah, oh, sorry, let's put that, sorry.
There we go. Can we all see that?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
Hold on. That's not working. Share screen. Desktop.
There we are, that's good.
Yeah. Good.
Hold on. And then there you go.
Okay.
You can use that to be done.
Righty-ho. So he said that he was born on the 13th of October, 1808, the day after Aleister Crowley's birthday, some years later, in East London, because he gave the coordinates for his birth date. He could have been born in Colesney, could have been born in Epsom in Surrey, but it seems to be that he was born in Hoxton in East London. The census gives his birth as a year later. So at the time, we had Mad King George on the throne, and the Napoleonic Wars were raging, although how much schoolboys in Surrey or Hoxton or Hampshire are actually affected by it, I've yet to discover. By 1820, the Prince Regent had become George IV, and he had Brighton Pavilion built. And by then, Frederick had left Captain Webb's school in Hoxton and become a book copyist and then later an accountant. Royal family trees stretch back forever, but there's nothing much to show which branch of which tree Fred belonged to. I found some Hockleys, and possibly cruelly, the original caption to this photograph said that these young ladies never married despite their good looks. But they could have been cousins, they could have been nieces and nephews, I just don't know. And they're from Hampshire. So here as we don't know what he looked like, I've decided he could have looked like Johnny Depp as a youngster. Right? And having left the nautical school, he then went to work as a copyist for the famous bookseller called John Denley in Covent Garden. Armies of people were trained in the fine calligraphic hand, and they were employed to create individual copies of books, papers, and items of interest because there were no typewriters. It was a cheaper way for small runs of things, it was easier to have people copy things and set up the type and get them printed. This is where he did it, in Catherine Street in Covent Garden, and Denley was the man who lent Francis Barrett the manuscripts to create the Magus that was published in 1801. He's the man who published the works of Raphael, of Raphael's Ephemeris, of Zedekiel, and it was a fantastic place for young Fred Hockley to meet all these people. And so he became very, very keen as an astrologer. He always insisted he was quite a bad astrologer himself, especially as a young man. As he matured, though, he became quite an incredible astrologer, and it was something that just never, ever left him. So Denley was the centre of all sorts of things, really. And Denley also maintained a correspondence with the cunning folk of the countryside. And the Complete Book of Magical Science was the first one of the first books that young Fred copies. It's hokum, it's medieval, manuscript, sort of half here, half there, and the third at the other end of the book. But it's 400 odd pages of medieval magic, and it's got talismans and strange diagrams, and those books still sell extraordinarily well. Lord Edward Bulwer-Lytton, who wrote the novel, wrote novels, including Vril, the Power of the Coming Race, and Zanoni, used Denley in Zanoni. He owned Nebworth House. He gave us things, fantastic turns of phrases like it was a dark and stormy night and things like that. Just go to his Wikipedia page, and it's better, half the things you think of Shakespeare were actually Bulwer-Lytton. He wrote the first science fiction, stuff like that. But again, Fred knew all of these people. He says, "It's possible that among my readers there may have been a few not unacquainted with an old bookshop existing some years since in the neighbourhood of Covent Garden, but there, perhaps throughout all Europe, the curious might discover the most notable collection ever amassed by an enthusiast of the works of alchemist, cabbalist and astrologer. The owner lavished a fortune on the purchase of unsaleable treasures, the old deed that did not desire to sell. It went absolutely to his heart when a customer entered his shop. He watched the movements of the presumptuous intruder with a vindictive glare. He fluttered around him with uneasy vigilance. He frowned, he groaned. When profane hands dislodged one of his idols from the niches, he groaned again. If there were one of the favourite sultanas of his wizard harem that attracted you, and the price named was not sufficiently enormous, he would not infrequently double the sum. Demure and a brisk delight, he snatched the venerable charmer from your hands, a seed, and he became the picture of despair. Nor, unfrequently, at the dead of night would he knock at your door and entreat you to sell him back on your own terms of what you had so egregiously bought at his place." And this is, of course, Denley is, of course, the person that Susanna Clarke based her character on in her hugely successful novel, Dr. Strange and Mr. Morrell. So every day must have been weirdly fascinating for him and a great opportunity to get an esoteric education. But we don't know how long he worked for him, because that mind that was trained in navigation at school, that then bumped into the astrologers, then became an accountant. And he worked for a company that is still going through various iterations. But that was his main way of making his money. But what also he did develop was an accurate and beautiful writing style that never left him, and made his own works a treat to read. And an addiction to books, his bibliomania, started young and never left him. And as I say, he knew the mesmerists, the cunning folk, and he knew everybody who was anybody in the esoteric fields. So one of his passions in life was that one. No? Was Johnny Depp. We don't. But that's it. Was horse racing. And you may be sure that he didn't stick a pin in the paper and hope for the best, but he spent days and days and days at the racing. And I bet you he was trying out systems and plans and what sort of horse, if the horse was called Luna and the moon was full, he'd bet on that. His wife then discovered a spell in one of his numerous books, and she used it to beckon him home. And it worked. He would get to a point where he could feel an irresistible pull to take him away from his happy place, and he'd go home to his wife. He seems to have been very devoted to his Sarah. So yeah, it also works with people in the pub, I'm told. But so where's that there? What happens next? Sorry. Oh no, that's all right. No, I've lost a couple of pages. Oh, never mind. What's the next? Oh, yes. He got heavily involved in Crystallomancy, and he found it a very, very accurate way of going about things. And at one point, he was trying to prove that he could see things in it to a young lieutenant, and he wrote down what he saw when this man went traveling. When he came back, it was Sir Richard Burton of the Arabian Nights fame, and he wrote an affidavit swearing that what Hockley had said had happened to him, and his diaries bore it out as well. I can't even blame the cats for this, but I'm doing a Boris Johnson here at the moment. Sorry. No, found it. I'm there. Right. So I can't resist fussing with things, you see. It interferes. That's it. So he'd started with Hockley loved his wife, and for 30 years after her death, he used the crystals regularly to try and contact her. And just once when she did it, he was just absolutely overjoyed. He'd started using the crystals to scry when he was 16, which was about 1824. And his work shows a fine obsessive mind. There's a thoroughness in them, and an accuracy and clarity were obviously very, very important to him. He was a conscientious recorder of scrying results and gave evidence to the eminent Dialectical Society, which was set up to investigate just such things and all sorts of weird medicines and astrology, and to see if there was anything other than stupidity and lunacy in spiritualism and things like that. But Hockley had 12,000 questions answered by women using crystals. And they went into 30 volumes, and they're slowly coming onto the market, as I say, through Titian Press now. And he used, in the traditional and even ancient manner, he used adolescent girls, and often they were the daughters of his landlady, because he got moved around central London many times, just, him, his crystals and his 1,000 books. And I think that he must have worn the daughters of these landladies out, because one of them died when she was 20, and she'd been working with him for 7 years by then. But there's also this thing that if people are young, innocent, illiterate, they have no world knowledge, they are not able to affect the answer that they give because they are ignorant. And that was an important part of getting an accurate answer, really. So his speculatrix, as he called them, were really, very, very, very important to him. So in his submission to the evidence of the Dialectical Society in 1871, he describes the seeresses looking into the crystal for up to 15 minutes and then reading as though from a book with great fluency what they could see. At one sitting, the words were so tiny the girl couldn't read them, so he gave her a magnifying glass and she was able to continue as normal. As the words were uttered, they disappeared and were replaced. Some spoke Hebrew, which they certainly didn't know in real life. So it was like the thing with the Arabian, with Burton. Hockley was asked if the spirit was in the glass or in the mind of the seer, and he said he had no way of forming an opinion. He leant towards the spirit being there, as it had to be an intelligence to transmit information beyond the ken of the woman used, which kind of makes sense, really. If you're using young and innocent people, they cannot know. So there has to be something that directs it that isn't just in there. And also, because of events taking place every hour, could be called up and examined. He also said that when people worried about the questions of spirits being clothed or unclothed, did anyone appear in the scripture naked? It was no good twisting words into fantastical notions if you want to get to the truth. Even William Blake was born into the Swedenborgians, and they were an angel seeing sex cult at the beginning, but some kept their clothes on and some didn't. So I don't know who's right on that one. So this is yeah, that's some of his work there, and you can see it's tiny, but say it would just move up like an autocue, I guess, really. And he was meticulous as the stuff came through. And no, there we are. Now, Fred Hockley started life as a Unitarian, which is the glyph on the top right, on top left. Tolerance, freedom, searching for meaning and value, an open faith community with diverse beliefs. Basically, they help you find your spirituality rather than tell you what your spirituality ought to be. And it's a very liberal Christian tradition. He became a Trinitarian Christian when he developed an unshakable confidence that there had to be a virgin birth in Jesus' case. His Christianity ran in tandem with his interest in the spirit, and that never shook, and nothing shook that. And again, if we knew more, perhaps we could speculate that the deep delving into working with discarnate entities started in earnest after Sarah's death, but we can never answer that one. A significant part of his practice was to pray and to dedicate the work, hoping it would be successful with God's help. Max Heindel was a Rosicrucian. Max Heindel was a hugely influential Rosicrucian and racist, and he also controlled the means of production of his very, very, very popular books. And when he died, Mrs. Heindel, the widow, took up with a young, interested seeker who's very tall and very earnest and had been working as a stage magician, but had more to him than that. And that was Manly P. Hall. And he was anything but racist. But she said, if you control the means of production, then you will make money. If you have to give a lot of it to the printers and to the publishers, then you won't. So he never charged more than $1 to have him hear him speak, even when he was in Carnegie Hall and places like that. And he went on to do more to keep the people of America spiritual than anybody else in the 20th century. He was phenomenal. He had a leg up by being with the Heindels and also having a photographic memory, I think. And he said he wasn't a scholar, he was a teacher, and he just gave what he got, more or less. And the massive secret teachings of all ages, he wrote when he was 29. And the first edition of it is the heaviest book I have ever sold. It weighs 17.5 pounds and is 32 inches tall. And it's about that thick. Very, very, very impressive. But as I say, Heindel said that a Rosicrucian is someone who holds dualistic views. Man is a spirit enfolding all the powers of God as a seed enfolds a plant. These powers are unfolded by exalted beings who gradually withdraw from us as we acquire intellect and will. Rosicrucians first became a hot topic of conversation at the beginning of the 17th century, really, and catching hold of one is as difficult today, saving your presence, as it was when the first manifestos were published. Eminent people, Dee, Flood, Backstrom, Ashmole, you name them, someone has called them a Rosicrucian, and Hockley's on that list, whether they were or not, really. He firmly was of the belief that a space should be dedicated to the work that you're doing, kept clean and kept locked when not in use. An opening by way of a set procedure and closing were vital. This in no way conflicted with his encyclopedia knowledge of the alchemical and magical text or his later Masonic practices. For a long time, he wasn't a Mason, you see. He came to that reasonably late in life. So for all Hockley's interest in spiritualism and mesmerism, it was a good old proper ceremonial magic that turned him on. And like the Grimoire of Arbatel, the Greater Key of Solomon, the Grimoire of Turiel, which until recently has been thought of as being too good to be true, it just had too much in it. Today, people can look across the European libraries and they're able to put things in the correct order. They're able to fill holes in ceremonies that people up to my generation did and thought were in the right because we knew no better. And now it's just fantastic. What's also interesting is that those ceremonies worked, even with bits missing and being back to front. So, as I say, the Grimoire of Turiel has stood the test of current scholastic scrutiny, and it's believed to be of quite some antiquity, dating from 1513, in fact. And it shares a common ancestor with Hockley's complete book of magic science, which dates from the same year. He said, the Grimoire of Armadale, Hockley wrote, "None of these things can be satisfactorily accomplished except by those who are independent and perfect masters of their own time. Those who have to get their living by daily toil of whatever kind had better eschew all thought of it. But I have reason to believe that it can be done, and if I were out of business, I would try it." And he had enough experience of enough stuff that if he said that, then it probably really was doable. So for all Hockley's interest in spiritualism and mesmerism, as I say, it was the magical science that turned him on. So how did he protect himself? There is a method of observations observations and method of evoking related to a great pains and diligent research. Retire thyself for 7 days from all company and fast and pray from sunrise until sunset. Rise every morning at 7 o'clock and 3 days previously to the work, fast upon bread and water, humble yourself before Almighty God. Watch and pray all night before the work. There are other things to do, which like make a circle which is 9 inches in its 9 feet in its inner diameter, just like the witches use. Pentacles and llamas to make, pure vestments and the altar to get ready before lighting the candles bright and early before the sun is up and the prayer can begin. The first morning prayer asks the Almighty and Merciful Father to listen kindly to his prayers and supplications. He acknowledges that he's been rightly punished for his weaknesses and sins and hopes for forgiveness. He asks to be purged in the blood of Jesus Christ, that he may become pure and clothed in the vestments of sanctity, that he might bring the work to perfection through Jesus Christ. So let's see if it'll work this time. Where should we go?
Just try that.
Just try there. Yeah. So this is one of his complete books of magic science. And then he sprinkled himself with holy water, then blessed the girdle, then blessed the light, consecrated the sword, followed by the benediction of the lawns and the pentacles, the garment and the perfumes. After that, an exorcism by fire, and he was ready to begin the magical part of the ceremony. The words accompanying the actions I've just listed were said in English and in Latin. The second part contained the invocations, conjurations, and exorcism of the bonds of spirit, and again went on for pages and pages. Basically, he very sensibly listed everything from the cat to his sanity by way of friends and personal treasures that he wants his omnipotent God to keep safe by hearing his servant Hockley, and by his grace put fear from him, banish wicked phantasms from his mind, and purge him from unclean thoughts. Importantly, he beseeches that neither the deceiver nor the enemy nor any of his spirits can have power to hurt him in body or soul, or in any way hinder his accomplishments and desires. This is all to obtain wisdom and knowledge, and whatever is conjured is to come quickly and in peace. It is very thorough and very sensible, and shows that he understands that the creatures he's hoping to work with only have to be contained, ordered about like servants, and requested to do the one thing that they in particular can do, which is the one task they have been allotted. There's no point in asking your car to cook you some spaghetti bolognese. There's no point in asking the wrong entity to go and find you treasure, when really all it's good for is finding a herb you can't find, you've misplaced. So he uses 18 pages on all of this, with many names for the Lord, and covers every angle he thought of to remain unharmed. Oh, no, there we are. This is what his booklets look like. And there's pages and pages and pages on, and there's a great loveliness to them. You see his hand there. And he really was an extraordinarily learned and very sincere magician. None of this was for show. This was his private practice. And he dedicated, when he wasn't at the races, he dedicated so much time to this. And he left a fabulous legacy that's been pulled together from here, there, and everywhere over the last few years. So, as I say, after more lists, 3 pages of prayer, then the binding of the spirits, and then at last something is free to appear and to be interrogated. The sort of name, rank, and number of who's there. Prove it. Prove you are who you say you are. Answer these questions and give the information requested. And then they would be given a license to depart, and more prayers were said. And perhaps it's just as well that there is a great first hand of what happens if you don't do adequate housekeeping. Shall I read what happens if you raise the devil now, or shall I do it later? Now? Right, you're feeling brave. Okay, get comfortable. It goes on a bit, but it's okay. So this was first published in The Spiritualist on the 2nd of July, 1880, reprinted in Lucifer on the 15th of March, 1890. And this is by Hockley. I'd been looking in the crystal one evening for a long time without having a vision. Before I left off, I asked the spirit of the crystal very earnestly, when would I have a vision? For it was very wearisome to look and to anticipate and then be disappointed. And this message immediately came. Procure a glass vessel a foot deep, flat inside and 6 inches square. Fill it with water from a fish pond. Let the neck of the vessel be sufficiently large to admit your 3 fingers. Cut the middle finger of your left hand, and having put a strip of paper round the outside of the middle of the bottle, write with the blood of the finger you have cut this one name, ... Paste this strip of paper around the bottle, and then insert the finger you have cut and 2 other fingers into the neck, and from it into the water let a drop of blood flow. If you do this, you will see and hear of that which will instruct you into your spiritual knowledge and aid you in all that you desire appertaining to the world. Although I thought it could not be good, he's a proper magician. I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't resist it. Although I thought it would not be good, I did not desire anything evil, and I thought foolishly that I could see and hear and know what they said without allowing them to influence me, or without for one moment surrendering myself to their possession. I would not do it again. It was not the power, but the knowledge that I sought. I was at the time in the house with a good many people in it, and fearing that someone might interrupt me, I locked the door. Before I began, I'd been obliged to have one of the glass bottle made to exactly the size, and I wrote the name on a vellum band and sealed it. This I placed on the table, and very soon, without any call, I noticed nothing more than the name on the bottle. The water began to change into a thick, dirty red liquid, and from there formed, as the water again became clearer, a spirit more like an animal than even a distorted human figure. It had a tail as long in proportion to its size as the tail of a mouse to the rest of the animal, and it had a peculiarly shaped horns. It increased in size so as to fill the entire bottle, with the tips of the horns rising above the water in the neck of the bottle. When I saw its head coming out from above the water, I thought I should be able to prevent it getting any larger by putting a stopper in the top. I couldn't find anything to place over it at the moment but a book from the mantelpiece. The instant that I stepped across from the book, the horns of the spirit were visible to me above the bottle. Very quickly, as you may imagine, I was back with the book. I'm very strong, as I believe as most men. I can lift a couple of hundredweight, and now I had occasion to put my strength forth. I tried to press the book on the neck of the bottle with all my might, but I couldn't move it an inch. My hands and the book in them went up easily, as if I could have lifted a baby's hands. I grew desperate. I tore the band off the bottle. I used exorcism. There was no fire in the room and no light, or I would have immediately burned the band. I couldn't tear it, and I had no means of destroying it. The spirit all this time was gradually getting out of the bottle. I couldn't think what to do. I took the bottle up, I threw it down and broke it. The water, of course, ran all over the carpet. And I thought for a moment I got rid of the spirit. But I was mistaken. From the water as it lay on the floor, it rose much larger than before. I went to the door, but I was afraid to open it. And then in an instant, I thought he might only be visible to me and not to others. And that if I were with other people, he would disappear from me. And I tried the door, but couldn't open it. I forgot that I had locked it. And again, I used the form of dismissal and exorcism, but it was no use. Having done this, I asked him what he wanted. He asked me to test his power by naming anything I desired, and said if I found that he gave it me, and if I would promise him obedience, he would do the same in all other things. I resolutely told him I would not, and that I had known he was evil and could escape from the bottle. I would not have called him, and still he didn't leave. And I then felt the place to be insufferable, very oppressive, as to be almost suffocating. My eyes seemed to burn, I was getting giddy, and appeared to see, instead of one figure, 1,000 of all shapes and sizes. I still remained with my hand on the lock. The room became confused and dark for one instant only, and then there was light. The evil spirit was gone, and I noticed that every drop of water was gone from the surface of the carpet, and on the white ground which surrounded the pattern was a single red spot. Although unnerved while the spirit was present, I was not in the least so the moment it had gone, and on stooping to pick up the small pieces of bottle, I observed round the red spot a circle containing words. And even then, on an impulse I couldn't control, I was all on fire to know what these words were. Down on my knees, I deciphered with much difficulty, ... returns blood which is too white for a sacrifice. The red spot rose above the carpet, the words disappeared, and there only remained a little piece of cold congealed blood. This I removed. In an adjoining room, I burnt the band which had been round the bottle, threw away the pieces of the bottle, and determined to be more cautious in future. Well, there's a lesson learned. But it feels absolutely real. And that was a very experienced man doing that. And I think that our society is too sophisticated in some ways for those things to easily appear to us. We're a bit too canny now. He was doing the medieval magics, and life was cruder, coarser, whatever. It was closer to nature, certainly, way back then than we are. And I think it was easy to access these things. Now, people use drugs, sex, and stupidity to do it, but he was an experienced magician, and it was really quite a manifestation he had there. So, so what happens after that? He had a good sit down and a cup of tea, I would have thought. So by now he looks like this. I think it was that experience that sent him grey, I think, really. So he spent all his time obsessively petitioning and cross-questioning Denzians of other worlds. And there's no harm in that, I suppose, really. He works, he moves frequently. That is Hockley. His clothes, his crystals, and 1,000 books, as I say, they drift around central London. He and his wife had ended up in Croydon for a while, but they soon got bored with that, unsurprisingly. Endlessly searching for the next fresh young girl to make magical use of. And then they came in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and there wasn't a preferred sort. And indeed, you can't tell a good seer by looking at anyone. There isn't something about them that you can feel. We had somebody in the other day, and he's been buying books on magic and doing stuff and all the rest of it, and just on a whim bought himself a pendulum, and suddenly he said it was like a television screen appeared in front of him, and it activated him like nothing else had ever done. And he's the most unexpected man to have had that happen to in lots of ways. But there's also kind of no going back. It's really good once you do get turned on to it and you get activated like that. So, as I say, he persevered. He went to the races. He persevered with his accountancy practice, and it thrived. And he, as you see, he ages very gently on the life he lives. And then when he was 56, he joined the Masons on the 21st of March, 1864, in the spring equinox. And the British Lodge number 8 met at the Freemasons' Arms in Great Queen Street. And he soon joined Emulation Lodge of Improvement, where the great game is to get through it without stumbling. And here I have the tracing boards that they use. See, I can do many things, but I can't do my own PowerPoints. And these were then lent to Grand Lodge in 1873 for the purposes of being copied by Grand Lodge. And those particular ones date, the emulation ones date from 1845. And as I say, the great game is to get the silver matchbooks, and they met in the Freemasons' Arms, Great Queen Street. He was on the committee for 3 years. He resigned in 1869 due to mobility issues when he was 61. Hockley liked the British Lodge, and he served as junior warden within 15 months and was his master for the next year in 1867. I am paraphrasing from John Hamill's Rosicrucian seer for this part. His lodge was and still is one of the 19 London lodges having the special privilege of nominating each year a Grand Steward for the appointment by the Grand Master. Grand Stewards serve for 1 year and have responsibility for arranging the Grand Festival banquet held annually after the investiture of the new Grand Officers and the reinstallation of the Grand Master. Additionally, they had to cover the cost of the event, although a nominal ticket price was charged, which made an appointment as a Grand Steward an expensive honour. I suppose it still does. In contrast to the usual garter blue silk edged and lined apron and collar of the other Grand Officers, the Grand Stewards, past and present since 1731, have been permitted to wear red collars and red silk edging and lining to their aprons. Hockley was invested with his collar and jewel in 1867, and he took full part in the arrangement of the Grand Festival the following year. This entitled him to join the Grand Stewards Lodge, which formed in 1735, and standing without number at the head of the Register of Lodges since 1792. The membership is limited to those who've served the office of Grand Steward. He joined in 1867, junior ward in 1875, and became secretary in 1877 until he died. He was so assiduous in his duties that the members voted unanimously to award him a special jewel, and he died sadly before it was delivered. As a mark of their sincerity and as a lasting memorial to him, the jewel was completed and ordered to be worn by successive secretaries, which it still is today. Hockley was in the Royal Arch British Chapter number 8 from 1865, but never held any positions of significance, although he attended regularly. It was odd in some ways, as I presumed it would have suited his interests very well, as it had a mystical slant to it. Even his involvement with the Soc Ros was a bit oblique, as he joined that in Bristol through his association with Irwin, who obviously thought that Fred knew it all already, as he didn't even have to travel there to become a Zelata, and bumped up to a 7th degree of Adeptus Exemptus, which was the highest grade Irwin would give him. Maybe they needed someone of his experience and depth of knowledge, and a popular and respected person always looks good on the books. He achieved high office without attending, apparently. 3 years later, if only it were that simple these days, I might lie. Tut tut. 3 years later, he became a member of a lodge in London, but again never attended or contributed in any way that is known to us now. Why he joined remains a bit of a mystery, unless there was something in the library that attracted him. Probably they disapproved of his practical path to enlightenment, as he believed the mirrors and crystals to be the way to expand man's knowledge and a step towards a real spiritual completion, which I think were probably in conflict. He preached the word that the most important thing a Rosicrucian could do was to work with the crystal to find truth. That method of communication allegedly led to the founding of the elusive Rosicrucian Order of the Fratres Lucis, the Brotherhood of the Cross of Light, or the Order of the Swastika. This time, Cagliostro came through the crystal loud and clear with the history and rituals. It was so special that Martinez de Pasquale, Comte de Saint-Germain, Swedenborg, and other big names have been involved since the 14th century, apparently. Really, what this rootless scholar, this dedicated ritualist, this lovable man got out of Masonry is not clear. Unless it was simply brotherly love. His wife had died, he couldn't cook, so yeah. The pleasures of the convivial festive board, and the virtue of spending endless hours as the lodge secretary. Maybe that was his particular pleasure, I don't know. His depths of knowledge led him to see one or more bigger reasons, maybe. So he was he the creator of the Golden Dawn cipher manuscripts? He knew various of the protagonists and had friendships with some of them. Wynne Westcott had access to his library. The Fratres Lucis were a magical organization and rather lead you to the Golden Dawn quite quickly. Their fresh start, modern mindedness for modern radical Masons and their wives, that was just what the world needed in 1888, especially as Irwin, Cox, Hockley and others didn't like Wynne Westcott and wouldn't let him join the Fratres Lucis. And then conveniently, they all died about the same time as he got the Golden Dawn organized in 1888. This room was built in 1888, and we have the original portrait of Mathers hanging in the shop. And I like the idea that they probably came in here out of nosiness and have touched our door handles. So most likely it was the purchasing of some of his books after he died that influenced the society more. But they were in with him, they knew him, and as well, I'd say it's still up for grabs, really, isn't it? He collected a magnificent library that even then people thought should never have been dispersed. He had witchcraft, alchemy, ghost lore, Rosicrucianism and spiritualism, animal magnetism, and yet again we have actual physical proof that witchcraft did exist long before Gerald Gardner, that he did not invent it. I thank you. So he could have looked like that, but I decided that he looked like that. Because he aged slowly and he had an uncomfortable old age, really, as he became infirm, really. But this respectable accountant of no settled abode. He remained charming and affable, dedicated and vastly knowledgeable until the end. And then ultimately, on the 10th of November, 1885, at the age of 77, he died. His cause of death was fabulous. It was stated as natural decay and exhaustion. That's a sign of a life well lived. That's marvelous. And so passed a charming, excessively bookish man with a magnificent library, a man devoted to working with spirits, safely, sincerely, and frequently, except that one occasion when it wasn't safe at all. And as you can see, like Christian Rosenkreutz himself, in this case, it was not 100, he wasn't 120, but 137 years later, he's still alive and well and twice as handsome. So thank you very much. Actually, I've been toying with you. Thanks to an elderly Mason who, to my shame, I can't remember his name, we actually do know what Hockley looked like. And he looked like this.
Yes.
Okay. So there he is in all his glory. Thank you.
Geraldine, thank you so much. And on behalf of all in the Metropolitan Study Group, I think it's a wonderful thing that you've honoured an old member of the Metropolitan College in this way after all these years. And here we are discussing his life and his work. And I think it's a wonderful thing that it was you that introduced this as the first woman presenter for our study group meetings.
Thank you.
So I'd like to open this up now to all in attendance. We have 47 participants in the meeting today. And if anybody has a question, I would ask if you could please raise your hand, the little reaction button on the Zoom screen at the bottom, just raise your hand there and I'll get to you. Please be patient with me and hopefully we will get through everybody's questions in an orderly manner. So who's first, please? Yes, I have somebody at Atlantis Bookstore. Go ahead.
I have one. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
No, it sounds. Geraldine, fabulous, wonderful. And let me say, I've heard Geraldine talk about Fred Hockley before, and that was at the MSG, MSS.
Yes, yes.
And you gave a paper there, which was lovely. And you have so gone into this in more detail and added stuff. And for us today, you've added some very SRIA information.
Yeah.
I would just like to state personally that all this business about raising the dead and anything else is completely abhorrent to me. But whatever floats people's boat, that's great for them. I have no problem with it at all. Some of my best friends don't like me, so that's so your own personal choice. But I just wanted to say that up front. But the question I had was, do you think, Geraldine, that Hockley was part of Lytton's group? Hyphen because of Eliphas Levi, because that is so important for this.
I'd very much like to think so. And I can't remember who it was on the continent who was working with crystals the generation before Levi people that that they thought so very, very highly of. And when you've got a specialist interest, whether it's stamp collecting or whatever it is, you tend to gravitate towards each other really then. And I think that it would have just been phenomenal because they were all sincere about it. They wouldn't have had anybody in the group who was just there to say, I'm going on to this, you know. You had to know your stuff to be working with those guys. And I like to think that he did. Why? The other thing that I don't know, and I don't know if anybody's done any work on it, is every year he went to Alnwick in Northumberland for his holidays. Now that's, you know, it's still fairly remote, and there was nowhere to stay unless he was staying with family that nobody has ever discovered. I mean, it really is kind of a dirt track to get to, you know, a mud hut kind of little old village, you know, back in his day, saving your present, you know, again, saving your present, but really.
Oh dear, we have somebody who lives in that area.
But
here.
maybe he stayed at the castle. Maybe he was doing some serious work there. Maybe they've got letters, notebooks, and whatever else that have yet to be discovered. You know, so.
I have another question.
Oh yeah.
Unless somebody else has got one.
Right.
Oh, sorry. I passed my floor to Derek on my left.
I believe that in Nana Castle there that was or is a big alchemical library. I believe. So that's worth a little bit of research.
That's down to you then, isn't it?
Well, you're the very man.
Well, exactly. I do speak that language.
You do. And you got time on your hands.
I
Don't you?
do.
Now you're a retired old gentleman and grandpa. Yes, yes.
I see. I have a question. When you use the phrase working with crystals,
Yeah.
what is that? Given the fact, you know, the fact
Oh,
that
yes.
crystals are ubiquitous these days.
Yes.
What would Hockley practically have been doing with crystals? What do you mean by that?
His crystals were glass. They were proper crystal, and they were also manufactured glass. There's one that he used, one of the diagrams that he has in one of the books shows it to be, you know, like the windows you used to get in old pubs with the sort of pontil type thing in them. There was one like that. There was another one with concentric circles. Others were plain, and it wasn't just the crystals. It was the shapes of that he was putting them in, the geometry and so on. But they were all natural, you know, natural or deliberately manufactured. And the one that he used to have, so he could look at it straight through it, as it were, that had was in a wooden frame that didn't have a back to it, so it just caught it top and bottom, side to side, so it didn't really interrupt. And but as I say, he couldn't see. He was like John Dee. He couldn't see anything, but the girls could, the women could. And I always say about John Dee, he had that mathematical mind where he was as psychic as a doorknob, classically. You then get a rogue like Kelly, who was as psychic as the day is long. And if Kelly was a charlatan, then Dee was a fool. None of us want him to be a fool. And they worked together for decades.
Well, can I make a
It's
point
hard to
on-
sustain a con that long.
I'd like to make it. I was going to ask it as a question, but I want to make a point there. The paper that Hockley produced in Bristol for the SRIA transactions was on scrying, and it's clear from that Hockley revealed that he was the person who wrote down what the SRIA did.
Yeah.
And you mentioned John Dee there. I therefore believe, as I've met a medium myself, that John Dee was the recorder, and that Kelly was actually the scrying agent, the medium, as it were.
Yeah.
And it would seem, looking at a lot of reports of scryers, that it was important to have a grounded, articulate writer there.
Yeah.
For the scryer really was giving their impression.
Yeah.
And of course, we had a fabulous experiment. The society owns a Hockley stroke Blavatsky mirror, and we, before people were scared of the results, we had an experiment with dear Trevor Dutt's wife. Can someone remind me of her name?
I don't know.
It'll come to me again, but
Bridget Whiting.
it was Bridget. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you, Sheen. So Bridget was invited by me to come to Hampstead and have some time with this mirror. Those of you who don't know what this mirror is, research found that it's a black mirror. So Egyptians and ever before they discovered silvering, used to paint black on the back of glass, and that produced a mirror. And I did that to my garden furniture. I mean, I had a glass top and blacked it out, and it's an amazing mirror.
And
so,
do you drink spirits around it?
I drink spirits all the time. That's got nothing to do with this story. But the important thing is, so the incredible story, just to carry on, is Bridget is doing her 20 minutes. She said to us, whatever you do, Alistair, knock on the door, crash in, but only allow me 20 minutes. And when we did that, she showed us, I've only been here a minute or two, a second or two. And she wrote down what she saw in the mirror in the paper that Trevor Dutt did on Fred Hockley. But what nobody, or some people don't know, is that dear Sheen,
Bridget.
What's his name? Mark Joel. Mark Joel knocked on the door.
Yes.
I was outside having a cigar with somebody else, and he was saying, I've just come to Hampstead for no reason. I want to come in, and I don't know why. And I say, well, Mark, Bridget's in there doing this scrying. Oh, I've always wanted to scry. I've always wanted to do that. And he went in, and he, in the paper, also delivered what he saw. And finally, the last point is saying, I've met a medium, and I was completely convinced by the medium, and they're wonderfully, incredible people, and they have a doorway into something else. And that doorway gives them information that they cannot possibly know. And having experienced that, I cannot doubt that there were people. I mean, Hockley apparently had, as you said, 3 or 4 women that he used. I changed the way you said it because as a man, I can't possibly say what you said. Use all these young women. I don't think I'd be allowed to do that.
Yeah, but I like the word speculative. I think that's very elegant.
So everything you said can be reinforced.
Now,
We have the documents and
as the librarian of the SRA, could you clear up whether it was Blavatsky's or Hockley's mirror that you were talking about there? Do any of these sound familiar? When he died, the following articles used by Mr. Hockley as in his investigation into the unseen, clairvoyant experiments, etc., are offered for sale. A large mirror in a walnut case, a small mirror in a mahogany case, a crystalline sphere 10.5 inches in circumference, colourless, unmounted in a leather case, crystalline sphere 9 inches in circumference, greenish hue, unmounted in leather case, crystal, large size, mounted in a silver hoop, which is attached to an agate handle to hold it by in a mahogany case, crystal, medium size, similarly mounted, mahogany case, crystal small, mounted in silver and carnelian, 2 glass cubes, 1 stand for large unmounted sphere.
And a bottle of Macau.
Number
Number 2.
2.
I think we've got another one as well. I think we've got a couple of those in that list.
As a
my
trained
unders-
medium, would you like me to have a look at them and see what sort of vibe I get off of them? Would that help?
Well, right. So let's answer those questions. I don't think we got our mirror through anywhere other than the auction of his memorabilia, because not only did we get the mirror through the sale of his belongings, we also got about 7 books, 5 of which are gorgeous and have never been produced ever anywhere before. And one of them I scanned religiously because it's got a whole load of French mysticism in it, which is amazing. Elliot Cohen, Martinism, Freemasonry from the 1717s, incredible thing. But the story that we have, and it would seem from documents that I'd seen, that what happened was Blavatsky was given 20 mirrors to look at, and she selected the ones that she believed were the best, and one of those was the mirror that Hockley obtained, purchased. I don't know either or, but we had that mirror, and as a society, I mean, and I can understand, a number of people have been scared, unsure of the power of these things, and certainly Andrew Stevenson could tell you some stories of people who gazed in the mirror and had their incredible insight, full stop. And I never had a question I wanted to ask about, and so I never looked in it, and you know what I mean. It's an old aged antique mirror. It's a beautiful looking thing. It's in a beautiful case, and it was taken away because the lock was broken, and the lock was meant to be repaired, and since it's not disappeared, it's since
to be
no longer with
be
us.
returned.
Okay.
But
To be returned.
but it is coming back.
Jolly good.
It is going.
And Geraldine, and you know, I would be certainly somebody that would encourage people who are interested in trying, or interested, who had questions to ask, to have an opportunity to do it. I can't tell you, both Mark, Joel, and Bridget found it the most incredible thing for them in that area of expertise. You know, it was for them an important thing, and I would not take that away from anybody. So, once returned, perhaps in terms, I agree with the Bridget saying, you know, just give us 20 minutes, because the same thing happened with Mark Joel. We went in after 20 minutes. He said, "You're joking? I just sat down.
Yeah.
I just started."
But it'd be a lovely show and tell once it's returned, wouldn't it? That would be really a very exciting thing to have at one of these meetings.
But we have to respect those people who are scared of these things. We have to respect people who are scared of things, and we have to, in some way.
I'll look after you, boys.
So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Where's the if there aren't any at home?
Sheen, we've got a few more here if you haven't got any.
Please go ahead. If anyone else there would like to ask something or comment, go ahead.
Certainly, yes. So a few things, Geraldine.
Yeah.
First of all, I am interested in raising the dead, but not in the sense that most people mean. There are some people walking around who they may look like they're here, but they're not alive. And that's the kind of people that Rosicrucians bring back to life. You know, that's the basic that we do. I have it on good authority that that mirror will be coming back. Its case is sitting, waiting for it to come home. I think it would be very wonderful for you to see it when it does.
It'd be a treat, thank you.
Now, what I want to ask you about, though, is Hockley and copying manuscripts.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe so.
So that's quite interesting. it appears from the manuscripts we have that one of his disciplines was beautifully copying and illuminating manuscripts that he had gathered in his possession. I'm always intrigued by that because sometimes he's making more than one copy of the same things. Is this a devotional thing, or is this a means of distribution? Is it a way of keeping it secret? Why was he doing this, in your opinion, Geraldine? Why is he copying these manuscripts with such beautiful detail, dedication?
Well, one of the things that I've learned from being a trustee of the Arca Library is that people copy things for people. And because it, you know, whether it was a chapter, whether it was a full ritual, whatever, because these things weren't worth, as I said earlier, being typeset for 1 or 2 copies. And so everybody did it for everybody else. And Hockley was particularly neat and tidy and very, very good at it. And back in the day, you went to school and you were taught copper plate handwriting. It was standardized to that extent, but his just, you know, he could do it with a flourish and with an extreme fluency. And so loads and loads and loads of people were trained as copyists in all sorts of things, not just magic. And you know, people would copy letters for people and so on. So I think that's why they were done, and then you know, done in 1s and 2s, and that would be about it. Or they lent them to their friends for them to copy and return.
I can only express, as someone who's seen at least 5 Hockley documents, that when you open the page and you see what he's done, you just go, wow, wow. Yeah. I was going to say, I don't do wow.
As an aside.
But yeah, they really are beautifully constructed, and you can see the construction lines on some of these pages. But he was trained as there's a word for it. Calligrapher. Calligrapher.
Yeah.
Yes.
As an aside, you know, that's if you were to contact Giordano Bruno and say, I'm really inspired by your work, you'd say, make your own copy and then we'll talk.
Yeah.
And we've got some of those copies are in the Met Museum in Amsterdam that people have thought, okay, now we're talking to Giordano, I've done it. Come on, let's teach me. Yeah.
But with all due respect, it's a lot different to a middle-aged lady thinking she's in touch with Saint-Germain, and really she's just getting low-level psychic drivel coming through. These people, if they were trained and if they were using crystals or whatever their preferred method was, and I think the crystal was the most likely one because words appear very clearly in a crystal, then there could be a genuineness about the contents of the manuscripts that you have.
Can I comment on that? Sorry, were there any other questions? So, having not looked into the Black Mirror and not seen or not had a question, I can honestly say that when you look into these ancient mirrors, because they're slightly silvered. Silvered is the wrong word because that's for a new mirror. These black mirrors have a darkness, a brownness about them. Replacing, I suppose it's the paint, the black paint has gone brown. So it creates a sort of cloudy look. And of course, the whole point of mediums and all of us really is that when you get in that zone, when you start to think in a direction and you open yourself up to what's coming in, and anticipate what's going on, anything is possible. I think that's really what you can expect. But if you have a question, it's something slightly different. That's just my opinion of my experience with this mirror.
But that's where the discipline of endless repetitive prayers to keep you, the cat, the budgerigar, you know, the fridge to keep working, everything that you can think of safe before you then open yourself up.
Yes, you must be safe.
You know, you're wide open then, Whereas if you do the same thing, but you're directing it, you're directing your power, your thought. If you're asking a question, it's two very different situations to be in.
And just to say to anybody who's listening and is interested in this subject, both Bridget and Mark Joel both had their own protection that they had in their minds set themselves. So when they started the operation, before they went into wherever they went, they had a protection and they had a way out, although the way out was us coming in, which they had both requested. It's important, and I feel, I mean, I'm not into the great magician thing, but anybody can do anything. You can make anything happen if you want to do it. You have that desire. But you must realize that there are protections you need for yourself that are essential. And that's what your guide, that's what your mentor, that's what people who have done this thing before will, I believe, recommend.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You're on mute, Shane.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you. I have a question. You mentioned about that the mirrors were placed within different shapes. By that, do you mean that depending on the nature of the operation or the type of contact that was desired, that the mirror would be placed on, say, different stands or holders that were in a sacred geometric way, if you like, indicators to steer the direction of the contact in a particular way? And do you know whether he employed the use of his astrological knowledge, in particular what's referred to as the times and seasons, the appropriate hours of the day or the night when performing certain operations to do with the various planetary influences?
I would imagine that he used his astrology as his jumping off point for almost everything he did, especially magically. It seems utterly strange to have that knowledge and then not apply it, because he wouldn't have had any, he would have had a fondness, or he would have had a familiarity with the specular tricks that he used often, but he wouldn't particularly have minded that you know, that they had to get up at 3 a.m. to do it. That would have been fair enough by him. You know, they were being paid. That was just how it was. Not in a harsh way, but just his work was more important. He was employing them to do it. So yes, I would absolutely agree that astrology was the key that turned the lock, really, for him.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you. Alistair, I saw you had your hand up again. Go ahead.
Exactly. Sorry, having read some of the other bits, both he and Elias Ashmore has stated the time and date of all their actions. And I don't know whether Hockley was following Elias Ashmore, it might be, but he is the first person who diarized time and date for his actions. And we have an incredible collection of material copied by Hockley in one of his amazing books on the hours of the day, the months, the whole gambit, because that is what you are meant to do. You are meant to look at today's date, or the date that you were doing this, and realize that it's not the right time, and that the better time to do it would be another time, which might be completely inconvenient to you. But these were the things that nature teaches. Just because you're ready, just because you've got everything ready, doesn't mean it's the right time at all.
No. And also his friends were, you know, were Raphaels who did Raphael's ephemeris. You really have to know your stuff to be able to produce an ephemeris. We can look one up, we can read one, but to actually produce that year on year on year, you have to be an astounding astrologer to be able to do, a mathematician. And Zedekiel as well, and all those people, they were, you know, his friends before the GD. The GD then uses astrology and scrying and everything else as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree.
Do we know that the information when it was coming through the crystals was purely visual, or was there sound involved? The reason I ask is that in other traditions, the idea, like black mirrors, or I don't really want to go into the far end of this, but the idea of like a pontiff or a distorted crystal removes the direct reflection of yourself, and therefore allows the brain stroke visual circuitry to something else to emerge. So I'm interested if Hockley ever recorded whether he just got visual information or there was audio as well.
I haven't heard of any. Oh no, hold on a minute. I dimly think there was someone who used to say it. They would read out what they saw, but I'm sure there was someone who said what she saw. And also, when you think of, they were working by probably one candle light in a room that had no ambient light.
Very difficult.
Yeah.
We don't get that same darkness in our rooms. They would have had velvet curtains or shutters and no street lights. That would have been it. So
This is coming back to this the clairvoyant-ish person and the scribe.
Ish. Excuse me.
Well, I don't mean to diminish the clairvoyant, the importance of the clairvoyant. They are most important. But what I'm saying is it was really important to have some ability to write down what was being said, because the clairvoyant couldn't do that because of the place they were in when they were saying what they were saying.
Yeah, and even if they were literate, they were busy repeating what they were seeing. But that's how magic's always been recorded.
But there's also an advantage with having a detached party and a questioner, because it takes a lot of skill. You know, if you had young maidens to do the scrying for him, it's establishing ancient Egypt and stuff. It's because that person, I don't mind about anything you're talking about. If you're doing it yourself, you're thinking, I really want to know the answer. I hope it's like this. I hope it's like that. You cloud your own mind. Having a scryer who can detach and let go completely, having somebody who can record and get that accuracy, means you don't have wish fulfillment, and you don't end up in the low-level psychic verbal section of Atlantis books. You know, you get.
If he wasn't a ninja,
your book gets.
You have other ways.
I'll tickle him later.
Your book ends up in the high-level skillful scrying section of
But Geraldine, can I suggest? Sorry, yet again for coming in, but from what Martin's just said and what you said before that, and the whole essence of what we're saying is that if you really want to go into these depths and open yourself up and go into this space to answer the question you have, you really need somebody there, a rock, a scribe, someone to ground you, someone to bring you back, and to record it. So anybody who was thinking of trying to look into a mirror on their own, I think the basic thing is, unless you've got some kind of discipline, unless you've got somebody with you, be warned, your mind can go anywhere.
Yeah. But also, I got trained as a medium because I've always been quite psychic, fine. But when I'm dealing with people, I didn't want to be a smart ass. If I was trying to be useful to them, I didn't want to cold read their bodies. I didn't want to just give them the same old stuff, all the rest of it. And people come in with all sorts of questions, all sorts of problems, all sorts of everything. And so I got trained as a medium. And so for me, I know if it comes from over my left shoulder, it's not me, it's spirit talking.
And I can hear the voice that you use when you go into that.
And I don't just use it to nag him. And then, but part of what we were trained to do was inspirational speaking. And then you talk, you know, if you ask to talk for 3 minutes, 7 minutes, whatever, you talk to exactly that amount of time. You're conscious, you can see everybody, you know what you're saying as you say it, and you have no memory of it at all. And so that's the state that the medium is in. And also, if she's taking down stuff or reading stuff that is in Latin or in Hebrew, she has no knowledge of that. She's in an altered state. She couldn't convey it otherwise.
So my experience of medium, which I'm sorry to articulate this now. Here we go. Well, I was with a gorgeous blonde. She was called Jane. She was from Newcastle. Thought I was, but definitely wasn't. She'd established that as a medium, she knew that the discipline was, she had to be a virgin. She knew that. She also told me that the voice that she hears as a medium was on her left shoulder. And we went out into Newcastle, we went to a club, and she spent the whole evening telling people facing her what their future past was. And every time she said it, I could hear this. It's a voice that doesn't change. There's no inflex. It's very staid. And so I knew, because I was by her side, so I was facing the people. So I saw their reactions like, how do you know that? And I heard her voice, this voice, the medium. Well, it was the voice of, she said it was an 8-year-old on her left shoulder. And 4 hours I spent with this person. It was the most amazing thing to see the reaction of people in front of me to what she was saying, and knowing exactly when she was saying the bits she was saying that were what she was saying.
Yes.
And that's what I heard from you. So amazing experience. Incredible.
Okay, I'd like to hand over to Hasu, please. Thank you for your patience, Hasu.
Not a problem. Geraldine, thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. A couple of thoughts that occurred to me. One is the proliferation of these sort of ideas in the 19th century, the Victorian period, spirituality, searching for that which exists, but we do not know how to reach it, all sorts of things. Why do you think that that was a period when we suddenly had a surge? If it was a graph, it would go peak and then go down again. Because as we sort of got into the 20th century, it slowly sort of faded away again. Was there a specific reason? Was it some sort of special energy? Was it that we became more aware of the existence of others besides ourselves?
There's always been a literate class that's been involved in this. Magic has never been a big numbers game, actual proper magic that people would study and do well. But in what was it, the 1840s, you had the Fox sisters in America who, invented spiritualism to that extent. They were actually settling on Native American land. Their spirits were just working through these adolescent girls. And, the world went crazy for it. Blavatsky went to see them. Colonel Olcott, who had been sent to investigate the murder of Abraham Lincoln, he was then sent to Knoxville, Hydeville as well to see the Fox sisters. That's where they met, and that's where evolved into theosophy. You have a literate working class, because the increasingly literate working class, because the machines they were having to operate were getting more complex. The number of invoices that were being sent out was huge, as we were importing and exporting when we ruled a quarter of the world. And so things changed quite a lot at that point, really, then. And then with the First World War, even I think post-Boer War, you have the loss of a generation of young men and the anguish that caused. And the Victorians were so used to having multiple members of their families die young that spiritualism hit with that point. And then you had the World War I on top of that. And so statistically, that's when this sort of stuff booms. And it happened again after the Second World War. And does that answer your question?
Well, yes, it does. I mean, in a way, yes, I think it's pretty much of the trajectory these sort of things will take. But it's also very interesting that I come from the Vedic tradition, the Hindu tradition, and back in 2018, my late mother would pass away, and we had to do special religious ceremony for her in India for the passage of the soul, basically. And when we saw the priest, he said, "Look, this is quite a dangerous ceremony. It's not something that anyone undertakes without proper preparation. He has to prepare himself because he's dealing with the unseen, unknown, and he has to control those because we will be sitting there participating, but we would know what's around us and what is friendly and what's there that's going to be." So he actually carried out a special ritual before the ceremony where he chanted the special mantras to protect us. And then he gave us this band to wear around the waist, which then he again did prayer. He said, this will protect it. Make sure it doesn't loosen or anything. Otherwise, you'll be in difficult situation. When the ceremony started, we sat there. He had to do all the things about the passage of the spirit from different points. And then suddenly, when we were sitting there, this swarm of flies suddenly appeared from nowhere. I just sat and looked, and I couldn't believe it. There was nothing there 5 minutes before that. And then he was looking at, I was looking at him. I said, "Don't worry, you just carry on, just sit there." And then he carried on, and within another 5 minutes, everything disappeared. It was nice and clear. And he sort of, it makes you wonder, out of what you said, that are we really aware of what really exists, and are there those who know how to manage, control, and invoke and assist rather than create havoc?
Yeah, I don't, the veils are very thin most of the time, is my feeling. And it makes perfect sense. You lock your car, you lock your house, you should keep yourself safe as well. And he sounds a really good, responsible priest, the man that did all of that, because it showed you that weird stuff happens. Other times you get, you can smell somebody's favorite flower and things like that to show they're around. It was probably getting rid of all the negativity and the unhappiness and the awkwardness that had happened to your family for a long, long time, because you had a good priest seeing your mother on to her next stage. And but it was good to get a manifestation, even if it is, a slightly unnerving one.
Yes.
It's good work on that man's behalf.
And that's quite common in India. You do get very, very knowledgeable people. And so just to sort of add to a point where Alistair made about having a calendar of dates, times, in the Hindu tradition, we call it a panchang, which is produced annually by scholars who put everything in there, the auspicious times, auspicious hours, planetary systems, the rotations, everything, so that anyone who wants to do or have anything auspicious done or any prayers, they need to consult that to check. And then they will draw a proper plan, which is again, something quite complicated. It's not a sort of hand. You're going to, there's shapes, colors, planets that go in this part of the solar system to make it auspicious for the time and for the occasion that you want that done.
And it's lovely working with people who have that absolute familiarity with what they've got to do.
Yes.
When they consult the book, it all makes sense to them as well. And when it's in your DNA like that years of experience is fabulous dealing with people like that.
Well, thank you very much, Ashley. And it's been very interesting. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hasu. One of the participants here, Kath. Hello, Kath. It's great you can join us again. She's placed something in the chat which I find very interesting personally. Going back to Hasu's observation about the explorations in these ways, communications in these ways taking place historically, or an upsurge in that kind of communication, an investigation. She says the introduction of Neptunian influence from 1846. Kath, I don't know whether you're able to, if you have a microphone, and if you're able to elaborate on this. But I think that may be a very interesting thread there.
I've unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello, Kath.
Oh, jolly good. Yes, and yet Neptune was discovered. It took a few years to establish the discovery as really being Neptune. He kept going out of sight and then coming back again, but they generally agreed there was a planet there in 1846. And planetary discoveries tend to bring new planetary influences into the general consciousness. And when Neptune was discovered, there was this enormous flowering of interest in the occult and in psychology and in medical advances that are Neptunian in a way, you know, like anesthetics and drugs, cocaine and the opiates became, you know, more popular from that sort of time onwards, whereas they hadn't really featured before to any great extent. And a lot of occultism started round about the discovery of Neptune. A lot of occultists who later became very influential were just starting out then.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kath.
I just thought I'd point that out because
yeah,
astrological awareness is a bit thin on the ground, and it's something of a speciality for me. So
yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Chuck Dunning Jr. Has just sent a direct message. I hope you don't mind, Chuck, me reading this. He says that I suspect it's a he. Interesting that we are just 1 week from Neptunalia. Could you elaborate on that and let people know what Neptunalia is? Because I don't.
Oh, greetings, everyone.
Hello there.
Yes, we're just 1 week away from the annual date for the ancient Roman festival in celebration of Neptune. Happens to be my birthday, and I've had a special connection with the element of water all of my life, and I just couldn't help but reflect a number of times on the significance of water in this entire conversation. Very often, what gets our most attention in these esoteric conversations is the element of fire, and then probably the element of air, and often the element of earth. But it just seems to me, and perhaps this is because of my own bias, it just seems to me that water is often underemphasized. And yet, when we talk about the phenomena of reflection, as in a mirror, for example, we're talking about something that's closely connected with the element of water. And we all know that persons like Nostradamus and many others would use water as their magic mirror. So I think that it's a fascinating set of connections that are coming together here in this conversation with the element of water, and I'll leave that for anyone else to comment on as they wish.
Chuck, I wholeheartedly agree with what you said there about the emphasis or the appropriateness of the element of water in relation to this type of study and practice. I absolutely agree with you. Thank you for raising that. Geraldine, do you want to comment on that?
To say, I don't think we would have picked up on that ourselves sitting here in the room. I think that was a really It makes perfect sense. I like that very, very much. And, you know, water was the first mirror. You know, you look over a pond and you see yourself. You know, it's quite remarkable. It's really only this century that we've ever been able to see ourselves from behind frequently and with great ease. You know, part of the reason why pubs took off is because people had a small piece of mirror at home that they saw by, you know, a candlelight. They went to a pub and it was gaslit and brightly lit, and they could see themselves and they could see reflection, you know, from all angles of themselves. And that, you know, that must have been extraordinary and added greatly, not just the alcohol, but added greatly to the experience of going to a pub when they first started. Mirror is very important. Yeah, but I shall reflect on that.
And I think in terms of our sensory capacity, if we train ourselves and cultivate our control of the watery element within us, then it naturally lends itself toward developing greater empathy and the ability to sense and feel with other currents, if you like.
Yes, and if I might add just one more thing there, of course, in the very traditions that are getting most of our attention here, such as the Golden Dawn and so on, we connect water with the Archangel Gabriel. And Gabriel is a great assistant for the kind of visions that we're talking about. He's the archangel of the message, of carrying the messages of God. And so just wonderful connections and meaning here to be drawn out.
Can I ask you, Chuck, is this your first time attending our meetings?
No, this is, I've attended a few others in the past.
Okay.
This is just the first time I've been moved to speak out.
I'm very glad you did, sir. Thank you. It was a wonderful contribution. And I'd like to, I know that Alistair, you have your hand up again, but I'd like you to be patient, please, because we have somebody called Manan in India. Please go ahead, Manan.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me, first of all?
Very clearly.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I hope you can see me as well.
Yeah.
The thing is, this is my first meeting with SRIA. Back in England, when I was there, I visited the British Museum, and I actually saw the glasses that were used by John Dee in British Museum. They are preserved there. So that's quite a bit of a connection. And also, there are two kinds of flying comments, I would say. I would just like to mention Hasu, Brother Hasu, for inviting me here. And secondly, David, who is from Wusa, for making me acquaint with you people. And also I would love to know that if and when, if you have meetings, I would love to join them. So is there any group or anything? Please, I would love to, know.
I would recommend that you speak more with Hasu about this, and he will be able to help you.
Right. So that's it. And just one more thing, I just wanted to say about the fire and the water thing. Just my observation. It's purely speculative. I think water is, for the lack of better word, opposite to fire. So it nullifies. It's like yin and yang. That's what my observation is. Just if it could help anybody. So thank you. And I love the whole conversation. And so nice to be here.
Thank you, Manan. You're very welcome. And yeah, it's good to meet you. So over to you, Alistair, please.
Nothing I've got my mouth for.
Anybody else, please?
Quickly. So one of the big Rosicrucian things is the dewy matter. And it will be no surprise, based on what we've just heard, the last two speakers, that the dewy matter is water. You have to understand what that is. And I'm going to bring in Shiraz. Yeah. She's in the corner, you can't see her. But we had a very interesting conversation about anthropological, you'll have to help me somebody here, anthropological progress of man. And there was a golden Rosicrucian book that was written in about 1778. And it has a number of pictures, which feature in my book, The Illuminati. Oh, plate 12. So plate 12 is an incredible picture of the waters as they are in the Bible. Water covered the earth. And then gradually, the dome of earth poked its head through the water. And the first creatures that we know of were fish. The second creatures were the creatures like the turtle that were in the water and the earth. The third anthropological, that word, were the typical forest dweller, the pig, the boar. And then in Indian Vishnu, the 10 avatars of Vishnu, they go through this anthropological thing. And this diagram in the Golden and Rosicrucians of Germany has the final grasping hand reaching up to the pentagram, and the pentagram is fire. And the fire is of man, of man's understanding. So all those two speakers who are speaking of fire and water are talking about the beginning and the end. Coming back to Shiraz. So I finish where I started, and I shut up.
Where Jew is Ross?
You said that. Well, that's down for you. That's discussion.
So I just wanted to mention that the Latin for Jew is Ross. Ross. You make the organised society Ross. Yeah, it's in ROS. This is why there's kind of a code there.
There you go, 47 other people. What do you think?
Where are we? Yes, Chuck here he's just said, perhaps most here know that Ross equals dew in Latin. Lovely. And he says, somebody please say hello to my friend Martin for me.
That was telepathic. That was good.
Chuck is a meditation expert that is bringing meditation into Phoenix.
That's a wonderful pursuit. Yeah, all power to you, sir.
Yeah, very good.
Very good.
So I'd like to open this up. Does anybody else have any questions or observations they'd like to contribute? If so, please raise your hand or just speak up.
I've got a couple of interesting questions.
Come along, everyone. Don't be shy.
It sounds like this wonderfully good-looking gentleman we've been talking about started off as Johnny Depp and ended up as Sean Connery.
Alistair Lees.
Surely. Sorry, Alistair, it was the guy on the slide.
Oh, sorry, that's fine. It's okay.
He seems to manage to do his art through like crystals and young women. It seems like he didn't stumble upon that by accident. There must have been many different tools, if you call it tools, that he uses to do. I wonder how he selected this, how he ended up with this particular kind of set of crystal and young women. And my second question would be, as he's doing his art, what percentage would be the person and what percentage would be the tools? As I said, we have this mirror. It's really interesting mirror. Is it the tools that he's using, or they're using, or is it the person who's doing the magic, or is it a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of all of it. You shouldn't do anything unless you know why you're doing it. It doesn't have to be deep philosophical, but you have to have a question, or there's no point in doing anything unless you know why.
Yeah.
So, as he explored his questions, you know, he never ran out of questions. And the stuff he was, you know, like when they sold off Denley's books, they had things going on crystals, on divination of various sorts, going back to the 15th century. Now, Hockley could well have copied out bits of those. He knew other people with big libraries. They all talked about the same enthusiasms that they had, really. So, and that was his preferred way.
Yeah.
You know, we all had, you know, that some people like Yi Ching to divine with.
Yeah.
You know, all the runes. For me, both are too abstract. I need a clue. I need a picture. And whether it's a cloud, I don't care. But I need something visual to take me elsewhere, really. Yeah, yeah. It's like the naughty boy at the back again.
For those of you who don't know, all you 47 people out there, Paul is not Freemason, he's not a Rosicrucian, he's just come along because he likes Martin Fools.
Yeah, surely.
We have a lot of sympathy. We have a lot of sympathy for him. But I recognise there's a deep insight there. And I think his question was very relevant, and Geraldine answered it particularly well. What was the subject? Because I'm sure I had an answer.
Well, it's just an interruption.
I'd like to hand over, please, to Benny, who has his hand up.
What it was I was trying to say.
Okay. I would like to hear what kind of spirits Hockley was contacting. Did he have kind of background in the spirits from the Goetia, or what kind of beings were he getting his information from?
I can't tell you, because I conveniently haven't got any of the books that have been republished here in stock at the moment. If I had, I could tell you, but I just haven't, I'm afraid. But so you can get them from Wiser Antiquarian, probably quicker than we will get them.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
And could I ask a question of you, Geraldine, please? What would your advice be to anybody who was interested in developing their abilities in relation to scrying? And what would you caution? How would you caution them, and how would you encourage them?
Well, I think once you're past your teenage years, you're unlikely to throw yourself deeply into anything, you know? And after that, you know what sort of person you are, whether you're a step-by-step person, you know, if you have a sweet, are you a sucker or a cruncher? Do you really go for it? Are you still a headbanger? You know, and it very much depends on you. And then explore various ways of divination. You may find that shells suit you. You may find you like the more abstract ways. And you often find that men have minds that like the abstract forms of divination. This is from my long years of experience as a bookseller, and that women like pictures. So, but it is entirely up to you. But just try them. And if you don't succeed with one, you know, try another one. If you've got the desire to do it, there will be something that will unlock you.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, very often people think that, the word clairvoyant is often used in relation to this, and therefore that implies our capacity to see.
Yeah.
Whereas certain other people, myself being one of them, is when I've had experiences like this, it's been more clairaudient, that literal words have been given.
Yeah.
And sometimes I thought, what on earth's that? What's all that about? And then several years later, those words have become incredibly relevant. But at the time, it wasn't for them. It was for something a little further along the line.
Well, that's the other thing that we all know, that time is a very slippery substance. You know, if you're waiting for a train, 10 minutes is forever. If you're having a good time, it races past. So, but up there, the idea of time is, their idea of time is very different to ours. And so they gave you the right message just 10 years early, as it were.
Yes.
You know? and that's nice. But also things like the I Ching, they're really good. You have to formulate a question. You know, there's no point in trying to do divination if you say, will I win the lottery? Well, yeah, you might, but, you know, or will I ever be a millionaire? Yeah, you might get run over by, you know, a truck, become a quadriplegic, and your insurance payout makes you a millionaire. You got to be careful about these things.
Specificity, eh?
You know, be specific. Yes. No, so, and the I Ching is a good, reliable source because you have to think of a crisp question that it can give an answer to. You then work with it to develop the hexagrams. And also, if you pester it, I won't tell you which number it is, but it comes up and it basically says, stop bothering me. Because people don't let what the cards, whatever form of divination it is, they don't let it unfold in real life. Just go back and they badger it. No, but you'll find one that suits you. Now, it could be walking. It could be walking a dog. You know, it's doing something that is non-verbal is quite important. Playing a guitar, whatever you're doing, you're slightly detached.
Yes.
And then the answers can come through.
Yeah, I believe we have to train ourselves to get out of the way to allow something to communicate more clearly with us. So it's not colored by our own intellect or our own imagination.
No, I also do firmly believe that a lot of people are trying to meditate and empty their minds. And I think, why?
Yeah.
And if you've got a persistent thought, why the hell don't you take it for a walk?
Exactly.
Quite classically, and see which highways and byways it takes you along. That's the thing that somewhere within you is trying to say there is a solution here, there is an answer here, or is there's a whole new way of being. Just walk with me, you know, let me guide you to that extent.
Thank you. Alistair, I can see you once again with your hand up. Go ahead.
Agreeing with Geraldine here.
Wise, Andrew.
Very, very wise.
Yeah.
Everything that she just said, I completely endorse. Why does she need that endorsement? But the thing I was trying to say before was that I found a book and it was 1,000 Ways to Divine. Okay.
Yeah.
And essentially what it was saying is it's not the process. Tea leaves, tarot, this, that, that. It doesn't mirror it. It doesn't matter the process that you choose. It's you. It's you and your preparation, protection, what you do, your state of mind, the question you have. These are the things. There is hardly anybody I know in this society, Geraldine especially, that isn't very empathetic. Empathetic. Yeah. We understand what people are about and what they're going to say before they say it. And you disagree with me if you like, but I'm looking around this room now and people are nodding. We know what people say. We know. We get it wrong, of course we get it wrong. But hey, the point is, develop it, develop it, develop it.
Yes.
Protect yourself, protect yourself, protect yourself. But I have, you know, just support everything that Geraldine has just said.
Thank you, Alistair. Hasu again, please. Go ahead.
It's very interesting what you talked about earlier on, Geraldine. I wrote down 2 names on a bit of paper because I make notes of it. I wrote down 2 words and I thought, let me see if they, and a minute after I wrote those 2 names, you mentioned them in your conversation. John Dee and Edward Kelly.
All right.
So, you know, is that a coincidence? Is this
No, it's my psychic powers, love. They're working strong.
Well, or did I plant the idea in your mind to say that? No, but you see, well, how things work, we have no idea. But yes, it was just very interesting. And
yeah, no, it's good because that's good timing. That it's like the telepathy between Martin and Chuck. Yes. You know, about the meditative thing. That was really smart. That was really very, very, very good.
And Manan, who was here early on, he was sending me a message, and I sent him a message, and we wrote exactly the same thing.
Excellent. Excellent.
So all this is real.
It is.
Believe me, it is real.
Yes. It's lovely.
Can I ask you as well, Geraldine, is the practice of scrying something which you have had personal experience of yourself?
Yes.
And if so, in what ways?
Oh, in various ways, really. You know, I've sort of tried everything, so I know what people are talking about when they come along. And you know, I like the simplicity of things. You know, if you haven't got a crystal ball to hand, you could use a wine glass with water in it. I like being able to improvise really with things. And I think also the more experience you, as with anything, the more experience you have, the more you can kind of jump into it. You can take a shortcut to it as well. And as I say, that's how I know. I don't like the abstract forms. If I've got something really serious I want to know about, and it's, you know, once every couple of years, I'll go to the I Ching. I often try to bully the tarot into giving me the answer I want, and so I'll change decks. I'll be completely unscrupulous about it, and I know that I can't defeat it. You know? And then I'll go to playing cards, like my grandmother taught me, and they'll say, "Stop it," as well, basically.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments they'd like to contribute? So if so, please raise your hand now or speak up. Okay, that's looking like it might be a cue to wrap things up for today, unless of course Alistair is back in the room.
Disappeared. He's left the building. Yeah.
So yeah, Geraldine, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation and for your knowledge and experience in these particular areas of study and your passion for the subject. It's an absolute pleasure that you presented for the Metropolitan Study Group today, and may this be the first of many future presentations by women for our study group.
Indeed, but it was an absolute privilege, and thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you. And for those who are watching the recording of this, we have recorded the meeting, and the recording will be edited and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel in due course. So yep, I want to thank everybody who's attended today. Thank you for taking the time to be here and participate and to listen to Geraldine's presentation. And I wish you all a wonderful weekend. Be safe and love to all.
Okay.
Have a wonderful rest of your evening there in London. And everywhere else. Good for you.
Thank you very much.
I wish I could be there as well.
You are in spirit, Sheila.
Yes.
Absolutely, yes. Lots of love to you all.
And to you.
And to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.